I just want to thank everyone for joining us. All of you who are viewing this. This is the fourth in a series of debriefs that we've been doing about the November elections. And, we're all overjoyed at the outcome. The Biden-Harris win was, a major step forward for us in this kind of battle that we've been having with the Trump folks and the states that we're covering. So today we will be talking about Wisconsin. Our Michigan, Arizona, and Georgia conversations were all about how they played a huge role and how community groups on the ground in those states played a huge role in making sure that we got the win. And as you know, PowerPack has been focused on that kind of strategy for the last 15 years. And we really think that that's an important part of the puzzle for maintaining and defending our democracy. Today we have Pastor Greg Lewis from Souls to the Polls and Bill Dempsey, who collaborates with them. He used to also be with SEIU nationally. Both of them are huge allies of PowerPack. We've worked together on things like the gubernatorial election in 2018, and I sit on a board with Bill Dempsey for Community Change Action Fund. We are, I think, really grateful to them for all the work that they did on the ground. They were part of the uh, uh, Crooked Media and Pod Save America work that we did. We raised some monies that we distributed into the states, and Souls of the Polls was one of our strong partners in Wisconsin. There were a couple other community-based organizations that we work with there. So today I'm hoping that we can dig in a little bit and find out what they all did to save democracy in America for us, take out Trump, and make sure that we have a bright 2021 to look forward to. They will also talk a little bit about what they're up to going forward. But why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves a little bit and talk a little bit about yourselves. Pastor, why don't you go ahead and get started here?
I'm Minister Greg Lewis. I'm the assistant pastor at St. Gabriel's Church of God in Christ. I'm the founder and president of an organization called Pastors United, and I am the executive director of Souls to the Polls here in Milwaukee.
And I'm Bill Dempsey, volunteer for Souls to the Polls, based in DC these days, but I'm from Milwaukee, which you'll see behind me. Old-time Milwaukeeans know these buildings. Some of them have been torn down. I got my start in activism going up against a fellow student of mine who wanted to take over our student government, a gentleman by the name of Scott Walker. And we stopped him. We beat him when he ran for student government president on our campus, and I've been fighting him ever since, mainly working in the civil rights movement and the labor movement. And I'm thrilled to have the back of Pastor Greg and all the ministers he's been organizing to lead the turnaround in Wisconsin.
Thank you.
So Pastor, why don't you kind of jump in and start talking about a little bit of what work you did this cycle, what you think are some of the important lessons to be learned from this work, and what are you kind of conclusions you're drawing about this win that was very important to us all?
Well, we started out doing what we usually do with Souls to the Polls, with rallies and brunches and breakfasts and dinners with pastors and one-on-one sessions, and having all of these faith leaders gathered together to come up with a common agenda for us to get our community out to vote. And then something crazy happened called a pandemic, and we were kind of stymied at that point to figure out how we were going to do all these things. We had a huge rally at one of the local churches, during the primary for our local mayoral election. And after that, everything kind of, was halted because of the pandemic. So we had to really change how we worked and got people the information. The messaging had to change, and we were a bit concerned, but we knew that no matter what, we couldn't stop working, because in a pandemic, the risk of you dying was always availing us. As a matter of fact, I almost died. But we feel like, or I feel like, if there's any life in us, we ought to be working hard to make sure that we keep things right in America. We certainly don't want to have excuses for not getting work done. And for me, death was not an excuse. Even though we were dying, we still had work to do. And and as the executive director of Souls to the Polls, I have to just tell you, even when I was in intensive care, I kept my phone with me because that's just how important I think this work is. Uh, our community is in dire straits. We're on a breathing machine. It's we're on life support. We're on a breathing machine. In intensive care, it's cold blue, cold red. So for us, there was no excuse for not getting work done. So the first thing we did is we started working, the social media. We had to work it on every level: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. All the social media had to be worked, and that was our only way to connect with the community of over 540 faith leaders. And for me, I had the most boring job because I had to sit on the phone every day for 8, 9 hours a day and call faith leaders and have a conversation about, getting, and connecting with them, connecting together and getting their membership to get out and vote. But not only getting their membership to get out and vote, but getting their membership's family and friends and relatives and folks in their families to get out and vote, because we knew that there were going to be some issues here on how many people we got out to vote. But I know that the church in our community is the solid ground. It's the basic fundamental place for us to organize and make sure that we get things done. And if we do those things together, I don't think the church can ever be defeated. So we started, with really just, contacting people on the phone. We contacted people with social media. We wrote letters. We used our texting availability. We started doing all those things in a massive way because we knew we couldn't connect with folks, and we wouldn't having church on Sundays. So all of this stuff was like new to us, but we had to get things done, and we had to get the message to the pastors so they could get the message to the faith leaders who work with them and their members. But not only that, this kind of organizing where, we don't have to knock on doors and we don't meet new people, as a organizing group. It's like, we talk to people we already know. We talk to our circles of influence, and the church was huge. As a matter of fact, every time I talked to a pastor, I told him, I said, listen, I need to know how many people that you and your congregation can get to the polls. And I don't want any numbers like these flamboyant numbers. I need something very conservative so we can count our numbers. And as I did that, I came up with the church and those 540 preachers. We counted over 50,000 votes. And then we asked those people to bring people to the polls. As a matter of fact, our slogan was, we're an army of faith, the power of 100,000 souls to the polls. Because I knew if we got those 50,000 out, if somebody brought somebody, we could get 100,000 to the polls and just have a groundswell. And that's how we really had that relational organizing going here in Milwaukee. And I was totally confident that we'd get the vote out in the church. And as we started to get things going, the one thing that really bothered me was our community and the hopelessness in that community. And then the suppression that we had to deal with, because as we were working to get people to the polls, those Republicans in our state house were certainly suppressing votes. First of all, you had the photo ID, and then, they wanted to purge 234,000 names off a registration roll. We had to go to City Hall and we had to go to the courthouse and we had to protest and holler and scream. You know, I still don't have a voice doing all that hollering, man. So we had to do all those things to make sure that the public understood what was going on, because our community felt like our vote didn't count. So we had to tell them, listen, man, if they got you, you know, going out and making it hard for you to vote, what makes you think your vote doesn't count? They don't want you to vote because your vote is important. You know, that's why they have photo ID. That's why they're taking your names off the roster. That's why they have all these requirements. That's why they don't want you to have absentee ballots. That's why they don't want you to vote early. That's why they don't have people to help non-English speaking people get help in these polling places. That's why all these things are happening. That's why they shut down the post office. So we had to talk about all those things in our social media conversations so people could have some hope and they could have an understanding that your vote really does count. As a matter of fact, I was telling folks who really thought their vote didn't count that Milwaukee's vote was the most important vote in the world. Because if we vote here in Milwaukee, we would change the nation and change the world. And it looks like I was right. When we came out and voted, when they counted those votes and they thought that Wisconsin was going to be red, when they got to Milwaukee and they got to us and we got those early votes out, we got those absentee ballots out, we had those early signs late in the evening that was going to change, and it did. So, you know, all those things happened because we worked very hard at doing a whole lot of things. As a matter of fact, in the last month of the election, we had a program we called Light Up Milwaukee. First of all, we put 100 early voting signs on 100 churches, big signs, 20 by 8 signs on buildings telling people to vote early. We had about 35,000 yard signs. They were everywhere. Everywhere in the city where you went, we had vote early signs. We had vote early signs on your lawn. If you let us put it there, we had it there. Then we had door hangers. We had people canvassing. We couldn't knock on the door, but we could certainly leave those messages on those doorknobs. All these things were happening. And we had a newsletter that went out to all the pastors every month, letting them know the progress of what we were doing. And that kind of solidified the fact that we were being effective. And if we continued to work together, we could get this job done. Now, the thing that we really had to do is we had to talk about more than just getting out to vote for a candidate. We had to talk about, voting for power. So I was sitting there, I said, you know what? We've been doing this. We did this in 2012. We did it in 2018. Now we're doing it in 2020, and we've been effective every time. Every time we have resources, we've been effective. Now we've been doing this all this time. So why don't we just create what we call a voting block? Why don't we just make it very clear? See, because in the church, we couldn't really talk about that kind of politics, Mr. Wong. We couldn't do that before. But after George Floyd and Blake and Breonna Taylor, people were ready. So we said, we're going to be intentional about this, and we're going to call ourselves a voting block. So we started telling people, if you don't like the candidate, let's vote for power. And that's how we got a lot of people in community to come out and vote. But people who were in the church were already strategically ready to come out and vote. So that is something that we started because our community was not really crazy about the candidate Biden because of the crime bill. And they were not crazy about Kamala because she was an attorney general. So they were sending Black folks to jail. And we couldn't get that out of young folks' heads, and we couldn't get that out of communities' heads. But I knew the church was going to come through and be strategic. You know, I knew they were going to play chess and not checkers, but we had to get the community involved, and we got them involved by talking about building power for local politics. And that's when we talked about building a block. So we talked about www.buildingablock.com. And we started to really galvanize with that idea with young people and people in community. And we got some of them to join us. But I'm going to tell you something. If it had not been for the church, this state would still be red. We had over 100,000 souls to the polls. And I can guarantee you, as long as we have the ability to organize, it'll get stronger and stronger, because now we understand our power. We got a new governor, and that was because of souls in the polls. And I'm not going to apologize about saying that. And we got a blue state here in Wisconsin because of souls to the polls right here in Milwaukee, because of the organizing and how people put things together here and how we made it happen for our community, even though they didn't want to be successful. We drug them to success. And that's what we have to continue to do. That's why we have to continue to have resources to come in so we can hire people like Bruce and hire people who work with us like Karen and Anita Johnson, all these fabulous people. If we had not had those people with us, this would not have happened. You cannot take care of business without a way to put gas in the tank. And if we find a way to put gas in the tank, we're going to be successful every time. And Bruce was always worried about whether we were going to get this done, right, Bill? And I told him, I said, listen, man, I'm talking to these pastors every day. And the pastors were telling me, they said, look, when my people come to church or when I see them on our social media, I ask them all, how many people are you going to get to the polls? Everybody bring 5 people. Everybody bring 10 people. That's how we got this done. And that's how we're going to continue to do it. And now, after all this is over, the work really starts in building this voting block. And all that is taking what we've done with souls to the polls and making it intentional and making it focused on some agenda items. And we picked out a couple of items right away, how to deal with this COVID and then how to deal with housing, because there's going to be huge issues and huge problems with both those the system, the pandemic, and the systematic creation of homeless people, because these people are not paying their rent or mortgages. We have to find a way to save our communities. And now that's where we're going to focus on. And as a church community, we're going to make sure that we stand up with our community. We're not stopping now. We're going to work even harder than we worked when we got this vote out. We're going to make sure that we get folks to the right places, that we get a seat at the table, that we have leverage with our votes, because we are certainly going to try to keep as many of those 100,000 souls to the polls together and call ourselves a voting block. And that's I could go on, but I don't know if you want me to keep talking. You know, people usually tell me to be quiet at some time. Well, my wife tells me that a lot, but there's so much excitement in the air right now because of the progress that we've made and the success that we've had. And every time we've done it, I've always seen it because I know what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with these faith leaders, these pastors. And I think back during the times when they had the bus boycott in Alabama, I saw a video and one of the members said, you know, they were being questioned by the reporter. He said, well, why would you guys do this? Why would you make this sacrifice? I said, because the pastor asked us to. And why do we get this done here? Because the pastor asked these people to get this done. That is we don't have many businesses, we don't own homes, but we do have the church and we have these church leaders. And that's the foundation for us building a voting block here in Milwaukee and in Kenosha and Racine and Madison and Beloit. And if we have enough time, and if somebody would let me go, man, I'll go to other cities and I'll talk to them about how to do this. And what it takes is just having a common thread. You know, when we started our Pastors United group, we started out with 6 fundamental problems we wanted to solve. First of all, family structure. Then we wanted to talk about the health and wellness of our community. And then we wanted to talk about economic development. And after that, we wanted to talk about the crime and incarceration, how we can involve ourselves in resolving some of that, education, and then civic engagement. And civic engagement turned out to be the most powerful initiative that we have put together with Souls to the Polls.
Bill, I don't know if you want to jump in here and talk a little bit. I mean, one question I do have is, what's the difference in 2020 versus 2016? I mean, why was the work that was done so successful and versus 2016?
Well, thank you for that. And I always hesitate to speak after Pastor Greg, but I'll give it a shot here. So here's the difference, right? And the important distinction is the year-round work that Pastor Greg was about, that we didn't just wait for some candidate to be decided on at a convention and then for a few weeks to plop in a bunch of people who came in from Delaware or wherever. That's not how this played out. What happened was there was a year-round consistent effort that had a series of strategic fights. And the fights were about where are the mailboxes. The fights were about getting people their IDs. The fights were about the poll, the number of the people who had access, these purges that were going on. And so each of those were like fire drills that Pastor Greg and his team were creating so that election day, there had been a series of people knew where to go by election day because we had been through all these fire drills. And so the difference was like night and day, Andy. And just to do a quick step back. See, back in the day when I was starting to organize in Milwaukee, there was a very strong, well-financed labor movement. And they paid for this thing called Operation Big Vote. And Operation Big Vote, a few blocks from where Pastor Greg was, you couldn't walk on North Avenue, which is one of the main drags in the African-American community, without Operation Big Vote grabbing hold of you, putting you in a van, and taking you to the polls. You couldn't go into Jake's Deli. That's a few blocks, a very famous deli, the best Reuben in North America, I have to say. You couldn't walk into a place like Jake's without being rounded up and brought to the polls before you were allowed to get your Reuben. Now, that all had been thrown out the window by two big things that we all know: technology. So Milwaukee's producing as many Harley Davidsons, as many Master Locks as ever before, but with about 1/10 of the workers because of the way technology is played out. And then Scott Walker came in and got rid of the public sector. So all that money that went to Operation Big Vote, gone. 2016 came around. You couldn't see anything on North Avenue. There was actually a New York Times report that where the reporter walked North Avenue, went into Jake's Deli, said, "Anybody ask you to vote?" And went into the barbershops and said, "No, nobody asked us." And so we lost all those voters. Well, 2020, we fixed that thanks to the great work and this partnership with PowerPack. And when Pastor Greg talks about the visuals, if you go to that website for Souls to the Polls, mke.org, you're going to see a series of visuals that we wouldn't have had if it wasn't for PowerPack and the partners that you all helped us put together. And so we were able to take advantage of both we continued to be out on the streets through Souls to the Polls, and we did these new influencer strategies where we were getting into people's Instagram feeds and doing all kinds of interesting experiments using these brand new tech tools. And so it was like night and day, where by 2020, you can see that voter turnout was up across the state. But even if you look at the statewide total, Milwaukee's turnout was 5% ahead of the state. And so that is when Pastor Greg talks about the margin of difference, that's what happened in terms of the margin of difference in Milwaukee.
And can I add to that? In 2016, nobody came and asked us to do anything. We had no resources. We had no way to hire people to do anything. And we were out the game. I was so disappointed. The Hillary campaign never talked to us. And the Barty campaign came and talked to us, but there were no resources provided for us to do any of this work. And that was disappointing to me because she only lost by 20-something thousand votes. We could have got that in our churches. I was so disappointed. And I'm not exaggerating either. I was very disappointed because a few months later, they voted for a Supreme Court justice, a state Supreme Court justice. And they still didn't come to us because they hadn't noticed the work that we had done yet. They hadn't given us the respect that we deserved yet. They hadn't counted on the church like they should have yet. So there was a Supreme Court judge who lost her candidacy by 5,000 votes, man. It was 5,000 votes. Man, I could have got that at a few churches. That was crazy. And that's what happened in 2016. Nobody came and asked us to help. Nobody counted on us for help. They thought that they had it made. They thought that they could do it. They thought they had it made this time. But I didn't think they had it made. I knew we had to work hard. I was not counting on those polls. I was not counting on that because I saw what was going on. I saw what went on during, the time in 2016 when I was going down those rural areas and all I saw was Trump signs. I said, Hillary can't win here. And I was right. This time I saw some Trump signs, but I saw some Biden signs too. So now things have changed because you have to get out there. You cannot keep taking this community for granted. You must put resources in these areas and they can make it happen. And that's what happened here. That's the huge difference. We had an opportunity to get involved in 2018 and 2020. 2020 was a huge, huge success despite the pandemic and despite all that suppression. I think there was a magnificent power burst here in this city because look what we had to fight against, man. I almost died during that pandemic. Almost died. I was on my deathbed. I would have died if I had not got to the hospital that night. I would have died. That's the pandemic. And then I had to watch people stand in line. 5 polls were open, and there's usually 180 polling places. 5 were open. And as I was sitting there recovering from COVID, I watched these people who could have attracted that pandemic virus. While I was sitting there, I was saying, wow, what are we doing? We should not have to put up with that. We need to create ourselves a power play. We need to have this voting block created so that we can be at the table and demand that things change. We shouldn't have to be begging for people to help us. Man, we shouldn't wait for things to happen to us. We ought to be making things happen for us. And that's what happened in 2020. We made it happen. We didn't let it happen. We made it happen.
And that's definitely one of the things, what both of you are saying that has impressed PowerPack and our folks is that, you have been able to keep this kind of growth and movement and, continued effort going. We saw a little bit of it in 2018, and then you continue it through 2020, which I think is excellent and really I think should be lauded for all the efforts and all that you've been doing for that. I guess, one of the questions that's going to be on people's minds is this sustainable? Is this something that you can grow, that you can continue to grow? Was this just an overperformance and, we're just going to fall back to lower numbers as we go forward? And then secondly, how did this play out down ballot? How did, we did great in terms of flipping at the top of the ticket, but how did things play out down ballot for you guys?
Well, I can say this. We've done this in 2012, where we increased the percentage of voters in our community by 87% the first time. And then we've done it in 2018. And now we've done it in 2020. No, this is not a passing fancy. This is what we built. We have a foundation and it's solid. And the only reason I could tell people that we were going to have a victory is because I saw what happened in 12 and I saw what happened in 18, and I know what I'm dealing with, and I know it's not going anywhere. And that's why, actually, I want to tell you a secret. What I'm trying to create right now is already here. The block is already here. But what I need to do is I need to go talk to all 540 faith leaders, and I need to say, this is what we've created. Are you willing to stay with us and be with us and make sure that we keep this together? And let's be intentional and focused about having issues that we can drive to our community. It's already done. That's another thing I never talked about. I always talking about we're going to create a voting block. Well, it's already done. We have the foundation for it right now. These people aren't going anywhere. I had a pastor tell me the other day, he said, man, when you was dying, we was all saying, Greg, you can't die. You got to keep this together. Leadership has been very important for this whole situation. We have brought this thing together and we're going to keep it together. And these people have some hope and they understand the power of coming out and voting. You know, when I see guys, you know, text me and say, man, we did it.
Yep. Well, let's talk about some of the down ballot races too, because this is one of the super exciting things about Wisconsin. And, you know, I encourage people to keep their eyes on the set of up and coming leaders up and down the ticket. So in Milwaukee, we now have a new city council president, African-American, under the age of 35. We have a new county board chairperson, Marcelia Nicholson, another African-American leader under the, she's 36 now, maybe? She's somewhere in her 30s. And we have a new first-time African-American county executive in Milwaukee. That's Scott Walker's old job. So one of the most right-wing people in the country has been replaced by one of the most progressive African-American young leaders. All three of those that I mentioned all come out of organizing. They all come out, their first experience was hitting the streets, organizing the churches that Pastor Greg is a part of, organizing around all the epidemics that these communities have been facing. And then we have our Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, who won in 2018 statewide African-American elected official, who comes up out of the 53206 zip code. And I'd encourage people to just Google 53206 zip code, and you'll see what comes up. This is the zip code that's one of the most incarcerated in the country. It's considered a zip code where problems collect. Well, the leaders that I just talked about all came up out of that zip code mostly. And this is where the solutions are coming out of. And we're going to power this change going into 2022. And this is the crucial thing for folks to focus on. The US Senate could very likely be up for grabs, and the Wisconsin Senate race is going to be the balance once again. We have an incumbent senator there, Ron Johnson. In Wisconsin, we call him Rojo. And Rojo has got to go. And this is going to be the challenge ahead for 2022. And let me just speak to one other aspect of Pastor Greg's work, because he's actually being very modest. He's focused a lot on, understandably, the work in these congregations, but he actually goes way beyond that. He's developed a partnership with the Milwaukee Area Technical College, MATC. And MATC is basically the place where young people of color congregate to figure out their future. And Pastor Greg was very smart about reaching into these institutions where, because we know that maybe the congregations aren't the way to reach all the young people. So he found the institutions where to reach them. And he's developed a partnership with the faculty there. There's an American Federation of Teachers, Local 212, that's a key partner. And they have worked to spread the word about voting, getting your IDs, and having it be understood that if you're part of this campus, you're part of MATC, you're part of voting. And so that, I think, is all part of the work leading into 2022 about how do we continue to innovate? How do we reach people where they are on their terms and make sure that what we're doing is something that they own?
Yeah, and let me tell you, the people he talked about, they would not have been in those offices. They would not have been elected into those offices. And we had a county sheriff who was also elected if it not had been for Souls to the Polls. I can guarantee you that. They would not have been in those offices if it had not been for the work that we've done, getting our folks together and making sure that we get out to vote. And not only that, we have respect on the streets, man. We have big respect. Man, I have gang members. I have folks who are in all these community-based organizations who believe in us, and they support us, and they make sure that when it comes to voting, when it comes to these politics, that we provide the leadership. And that's really important. We have the respect of this whole community, and it's an integrity that is not failing. It is getting stronger and stronger all the time. I have so many folks who have thanked us, who they even have done get out the vote campaigns, but they thank us because of what we've done. Because people know if it had not been for pushing the way we push, and I'm gonna tell you something else that's peripheral. Not only did we get the church community out, but we got all these communities around us out. Because whenever they came through Milwaukee, all they saw was vote early, vote here, do this, do that. We put that on the minds of all the people in our community area. And that was important. because now the church is different now. People don't go to churches in their communities anymore. Man, now communities are all over that come into the church. They don't live by the church. Man, they might drive 20 minutes to the church, but we have to get to all those people too. So even if all the neighborhoods weren't getting messaging that we needed them to get, that's not all of us. Now we're the highest population of race in Milwaukee. We're the majority. We made sure that everybody everywhere in every area around here got the message that we have to get this vote out, and get your family, friends, neighbors, and relatives. Man, get that dog out to register, because we're going to make sure that we win in 2020. And that's the way we are now. And our integrity is so high right now. Man, people asking me to run for something. I said, no, I'm having too much fun doing what I'm doing. I'm not running for anything. I'm going to make sure that we stay together and keep pushing people to do what they need to do to provide quality help for our communities. And now we've got the formula, and we're going to continue to do it. No, we're not going to stop. It's going to get stronger. It's getting stronger every day. I'm on the phone right now. I'm starting to talk to people. My conversation is, we have to build the block, right? Oh yeah, I'm ready for that. Oh yeah, that's what's happening now. We're building the block, but the block is already here. But we're building on it. We're making confident and making it solid so that we can stick together without having conversation. And at some point, we're going to have even more pastors involved. But right now, we have a solid base.
One other quick thing, Andy, is just, there are some serious challenges and stuff that we're really struggling to figure out, and that we need really this continued partnership with PowerPack to get to. How do we, figure out a lot of these problems? And one is the gerrymandering.
Yeah,
so, we did not make progress in the state legislature. We saw some really positive signs, like suburban communities really coming out for Democrats in bigger ways, but it wasn't enough to really flip these races because of that gerrymandering. So, that we didn't make much headway with, and we're a ways away of figuring out how do we. And then there were some other strange things that happen statewide. Like normally you have parts of the state that vote in sync. So this community called Wausau, which is in the western part, and Green Bay in the north and in the eastern part, normally vote together. They actually voted very differently. Green Bay came more closer to the way Milwaukee voted, Wausau didn't. And so we have like, the state is moving and it's changing, and we need a hard look at what that means and what it means for our organizing. So there's a lot of challenges that we face as we, pivot to 2022. But I'll tell you, I want people to remember these names. Remember this name, Mandela Barnes. Remember these names, Marcelia Nicholson. These are folks that, they're going to be the hope of this state and this community. And it wouldn't have happened, frankly, if it wasn't for the opportunities they had to become leaders in the Fight for 15, in faith-based organizing, that led to them to having the careers they have now.
Yeah, that's very important. And I think, it is very important for all of our donors to be thinking about places like Wisconsin. I mean, this needs to be a stronghold for us going forward. If we are going to have an impact on the Senate, if we're going to have the impact on, Congress, if we're going to be able to give Biden and Harris the chance to reach their fullest potential, I think places like Wisconsin are critical to that strategy. I think the other comment I'd like to make is that, in our debriefs on Georgia, in our debriefs on Arizona, in our debriefs on Michigan, these themes all came up as well. We saw the development in Georgia, from Jason Carter's race for governor all the way through Stacey Abrams' race all the way to winning in 2020. It wasn't just one cycle. It was a developmental process, and I think the community engagement has been significant. In Georgia now, they're following up. The community groups we work with are following up with like 800,000 people who registered for early vote, and that became a significant number. In Michigan and Arizona, there's been critical kind of moves in Arizona in particular. You saw what happened in Maricopa County and a number of places to really kind of build our work. One challenge, though, that I think has been ongoing for a lot of us as we look to the future is, what is going on in the suburban and rural areas, and whether those are areas that we can make some breakthroughs. I think Georgia has really kind of demonstrated some real success in that space, and I was wondering how this is playing out in Wisconsin these days.
The suburban areas were some of our greatest help. We drove 300 people to the polls on that day, and those were basically suburban citizens who did all of that, who have always volunteered, who have always been really willing to help in communities that have been disadvantaged. That's something that's being turned around right now. And I don't know the dynamics of why this is happening, but folks, from Sherwood and Glendale and Fox Point, these are our suburban areas. They, when I went in those areas, all I saw was Biden signs, man. And I don't know why that happened, but that's what's happening right now. Because I think people are sick of, the lies about racism and ignoring the plight of people who have been affected by these crazy attitudes about race over the years. I think people are really starting to see, like I said, after Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Blake in Wisconsin, they're finally starting to see that, listen, we've been telling you this all this time, but you know what? We got to take advantage of this time right now before things get back as business as usual. I think we have to really we got to drive our energy right now. We have to walk through that door right now before people start saying, there probably isn't any racism. And these people really do need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. We better get busy right now while their door is open, while they're admitting that there is racism. And these people are really being conscientious about how they treat their brothers and sisters. That's important. And that's what's happening in Georgia right now. And that's what's happening right here around the suburbs of Milwaukee. And I was shocked to see it when all I saw was Biden signs and Black Lives Matter signs on lawns and places you never saw that before. That is changing, and we need to make sure that we continue to help that change by working together and assuring folks that we are going to work together and cooperate with one another so that we can lift up folks who are really downtrodden and have not been taken care of in the past.
Let me give one other quick example of that in terms of what happened with the suburbs and how it happened, because Pastor is absolutely correct in terms of challenging race in these areas. And it is one of the hardest things in Milwaukee. So for folks that might not be familiar, Milwaukee is considered a hyper-segregated city. Sociologists had to invent a new word to describe the level of segregation in Milwaukee. And what it refers to is not just where you live, it refers to your likelihood of ever seeing somebody from another ethnic background. And in Milwaukee, it's the lowest of anywhere in the country because of how you commute, where you worship, where you shop, where you work. It covers all of that. And so to overcome that, there has been year-round organizing, not only by the churches, but I also want to give a shout out to our sister organization that, Souls to the Polls does a lot of close work with, and that is Voces de la Frontera, that Power Pack so supported. And what Voces has is one of the largest turnout capacities in the state of Wisconsin. Every May 1st, and people might remember like 10, 15 years ago, around the country, there were these big May 1st actions. In Wisconsin, those never went down. They turn out 100,000 people every single year, which in Milwaukee is unheard of. And by doing that, what they've done is when Trump came in to demonize immigrants, people knew, because there had been years and years of organizing work by Voces de la Frontera to say, no, these are our neighbors. These are the folks we work with. These are the folks dating our kids. You know, we're not buying this anymore. And so I think that we have to really understand that this change didn't happen just because people were turned off by Trump. It happened because they had a real lived experience of what it is to be in this community and who are the essential workers and who are the essential parts of this community. And that came from a visible physical presence. And so I don't know if we'll be over this pandemic by May 1st, but if we are, I would love it if we organized a site visit of folks to come to Milwaukee, show you around, see what this action is like with Voces de la Frontera, and then walk down North Avenue. And North Avenue is a really interesting point about this question about the suburbs, because the area that Pastor Greg is in, a center of the African-American community, was originally a center of the Jewish community. And the reason it became an African-American community is because Jewish homeowners were the only ones who would sell homes to African-Americans in Milwaukee. And so it became a neighborhood of African-Americans, but the vestiges are still there, like that Jake's Deli that I mentioned,
Yep.
which we're going to get people to for their Reuben sandwich. But you're going to see the history. Golda Meir used to eat at that deli. And those families moved out and moved north to the suburbs that Pastor Greg's talking about, Fox Point, Shorewood, and these places. And they have an ancestral connection to this older neighborhood that, because of Pastor Greg's work, because of Vosa's work, we don't tolerate this kind of hatred anymore. And it's now become this wave election. And that's going to continue to work, assuming we can continue to do this organizing work on the ground.
I mean, that's, you know, a critical point. I mean, the idea about the kind of multiracial kind of work and building coalitions and collaborations. I mean, one of the things that struck me is that in Georgia right now, if you saw the debates last night, you know, they're really thinking about, I mean, the right is really thinking about how to put a wedge between the Latino kind of population and the liberal to progressive populations and so on. So I don't know if you have any insights or thoughts about, you know, what's going on in Georgia. And, you know, it seems like the Republicans are really trying to figure out a way to put a wedge in there between our communities and that sort of thing. And how do you battle that? How do you kind of protect against that kind of thing?
Yeah. Pastor Greg, you're a veteran at this now.
You know what I found out is that there is no secret formula. There's no easy way. And I got to tell you, the most effective way that we have communicated with folks who we need to have as partners is at my kitchen table. Mm-hmm. There's no other way, man. There's no, right. I mean, you can come up with all the kind of genius work you want, but the old fashioned, let's get down and organize, let's have a conversation is the only way. One-on-one sessions, you know, sometimes, you know, I have 3-hour conversations with folks, man, when I'm making phone calls in a day. One pastor might take up 3 hours. There is no other way to do this except to just talk to folks, you know, let them get to know you, that kind of thing. That's it. There is no secret formula. Somebody tell me if there is, because I can stop doing that, because that takes a lot of time, but it's effective. We just have to get to know each other. You know, we have the same kind of issues, maybe not in the same areas, but everybody wants to have peace. They want to sit on their porch and enjoy their neighborhoods. They want to enjoy home ownership. They want to enjoy shopping freely. They want to enjoy crime-free areas. All those things, we need to talk about those things, and we need to share our experiences with one another. If we want to have a time and place where we can certainly be together, there is no easy way to do that except to just do it. Just get on that. Now we can't meet in person anymore, so we have to be on the phone, but we can do Zoom, we can do all those things, but we need to build these relationships and continue to do that. And there's no easy way. You know, there's no way out. Some people people don't get to see what I do, Mr. Wong, because I'm at my kitchen table. So, but they see what Anita does and they see what all these other people do, but they don't see what I do. And that's the work right there. Man, this is the work right here. This is the grunt work. This is where we make it happen. This is where the deals are made. We don't make these deals in public. We make these deals in private. We make these relationships in private. Man, we make these bargains in private. We have phone calls and I care about you and you care. That's the only way it gets done. I hate to tell you that, but there is no quick fix to that one. You just have to do the work. That's it.
Yeah, I think a lot of campaigns talk about relational organizing, and the reality is that it's in community groups like yours and others that go back to the civil rights movement and back to labor movements in the past that actually created the idea of relationship or relational organizing and so on. So I think you're right. There's a lot of deep-seated work that needs to go on and needs to happen. And you know, we at Power Pack really believe in that and are kind of born out of that kind of work and so on. So,
Yeah.
so you know, we're kind of on the last few minutes here, and I wanted to just ask for you to reiterate or expand on what is kind of the future for you guys. What's this next 2 years going to look like, and you know, how can Power Pack be supportive, and how can our donors be supportive of your guys' work over the next cycle?
So look, there's a series of struggles ahead of us. And let me just give one quick example, right? These Trump people are not going away. And they nearly pulled it off in Wisconsin. Wisconsin was still the tipping point state this year. That margin was razor thin, and they almost got away with it in the African-American community. There were a number of months in there when you looked at the polling numbers, we have, you know, where African-American support was really in jeopardy. And so let me just give one example. They owned Black radio in Milwaukee. And so if you were listening to the radio station in Milwaukee, which is what Black communities in Milwaukee do, and you were hearing ad after ad from the Trump people saying, you know, Joe Biden's a racist. Kamala Harris said so herself, listen to her. And that was the soundtrack throughout the households in the neighborhoods. And the only way you counteract that set of money that was being dumped in that community was through the relational work, through the powerful organizing work that counteracted that and said, look, stop listening to those ads. We got another story here we got to talk to you about. We got to talk about healthcare. We got to talk about this pandemic. And Pastor Greg did that, and those leaders did that. So look, they have their tools, and they are going to do the money dump that they're going to do, and they're not giving up. They're not going away. We can't go away either. And if you go to the Souls to the Polls, mke.org, you'll see the plan going forward. And there is a donate button there too, which we're going to ask people to click on, because we are not stopping. Anita Johnson, I hope people get a chance to meet Pastor Greg's crew. Anita is one of the most serious, rooted, effective voting rights organizer you're ever going to come across. She knows exactly what are the buttons to push when some young cynical person can't figure out why they should be doing this. And then they turn around and are starting to recruit their friends. She's one of those spark plugs. And we need a lot more spark plugs like that for this community to continue to assert itself and to beat back these other forces. But Pastor Greg, I know you've got a lot more to add.
Well, you know, I would just add that, listen, my work has already started. I'm on the telephone because I know what it takes to get this done. You know, I don't have to worry about any secrets, you know, because I know how we did it and I know how it can be done. I'm on the telephone right now and I'm talking to folks about building the block. Building the block, www.buildingtheblock.com. That's what I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about us having leverage in our local politics that would increase over the years as long as people can see victories. And I'm talking about getting victory after victory right now. I'm talking about working on housing, and I'm talking about working on this pandemic problem. And then we're being intentional about that right now to make sure that people see that if we work together, we cannot lose. And that's where we are right now. So the leaders, the top preachers of the city, they get a call from me. This is how we are going to keep this sustainable. This is how we're going to keep it going. And it's got to have some root. It's got to have gasoline. We got to have people who can help. We got to have people who can make phone calls. We got to have people who can still canvass. We got to have people who can still deliver messages. We have to have people who can write letters. All these kind of things still need to happen. And we need to support our community in whatever small community engagements there are, that we can have our faces seen so the community cares. But basically, we need to keep on building on our politics so that we can have a seat at the table. And that seat should not be replaced by anything or anybody. We should always be there from now on. And that's what I'm thinking. Us, we're building that voting block to have leverage for our local politics.
Well, I want to thank you, Pastor and Bill. I want to thank you both for participating today. I think a lot of our donors are really interested in kind of how things went down in Wisconsin and where we're going with this. I do want to encourage all of our donors to keep tuned. We will put links together with these debriefs. We will put links in the text where you can go and contribute and participate. For Power Pack, we want to continue working in Wisconsin. We now have had the taste of 2 cycles, and it's been very, very good. Obviously, the outcome was stupendous. We're really inspired by the work. I think that there's a future in Wisconsin that I think is going to be critical to the nation. I think there's a lot of good work going on there, and I think Power Pack would benefit by continuing to collaborate with Souls and Voices and the other organizations out there. I also want to point out that right now we are in this battle in Georgia, and we are fundraising and organizing for the Georgia work. We are working with the America Votes table there and the Georgia Engage folks, as well as New Georgia Project Action Fund. And we are taking a slightly different kind of approach. The main campaign, the coordinated campaign, is definitely well funded and doing a lot of traditional campaign work. We are focused also on independent expenditures that are doing community-based organizing work, similar to what Souls to the Polls does, similar to what we've done in Georgia in the past 3 or 4 cycles. So we are also fundraising for that, collaborating with them, trying to enhance the work there. So I do encourage folks to look out for opportunities to support us over the next few weeks. And I'm really glad you have been able to join us. And, we're going to continue this series as we go forward. So thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for participating. And again, thank you, Pastor, and thank you, Bill, for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.